How does your brain feel when you get a take? How does that feel? How does that go? What is happening there in the mind?
This is drugs. Question?
In what condition is your mind when you land that big fish? In what condition is it when you just lost one? In this episode, we're going to talk about mental constitutions of fly fishing, fish catching, fish releasing, and also my favorite mental constitution, flow state and fly casting. We do that straight after the coolest intro on YouTube.
Eventually, the rocks or timeless rains merge into one. I am haunted. Under the rocks are the words, and a river runs through, and some of the words are theirs.
So how is that when you get that take, that buzz? What's happening there with the synapses in your brain, that they're all firing? And also what is happening when you finally land that big fish? Yay!
Brain on drugs. Any questions?
Celebrate. Or when you lose it. What's happening when you lose that big fish? Big old trembly lip. I'd be highly interested to measure these constitutions that are in the brain there, and I hope I find some brain health scientists on the way who can measure that shit, because I really would be interested to find out what happens there and how that happens. For me, it's clear it happens on the base of water. And one thing is also clear, we don't own the water owns us, isn't it? So, the constitution. Now, you as a fly fisher can probably follow that train of thought if I say, you stand in a river for ages and you swing a fly, or you try very hard to catch a fish, whatever method you do, and suddenly you get that take. Oh, you go, you. Watch people having these takes, like they immediately turn into children, into monsters, into just that fascination, that ding-a-ling-a-ling, ting. What is it? What is that thing? And that must be the fish telling us, look after our water, isn't it? Who else can that be? Because the same water is in your mind, making that reaction somehow. Now, you can go deeper into the dopamines and the serotonins and the flycastamines is how I call them. My favorite mental constitution, my mental brain high, my favorite mental brain high comes from fly casting. Actually. But yeah, this is something that fascinates me very much, and I would love to find a scientist who can approach that. Because if you look at these dopamine regulations and all these management systems that in your brain, the brain is a supercomputer. She has to, whoever, whatever it is, has to manage stuff there, and in the first place it has to protect you. I told you that a lot of time about the casting. And if you can switch that protection mode off, you get a better feedback over the direct things that are happening. Nevertheless, you get that hit, and by the way, in taking drugs, taking a hit, same thing, eh? That's crazy, isn't it? Now, and I also think, I'm 100% convinced that mental high you're getting there is super healthy, and especially the mental high you're getting from good casting is especially super crazy. Healing was the word I was looking for. Healing waters is actually a movement. Look them up. And I would love to contribute to the science of that with the help of the tools of the PRFC, because that vibration, that whatever happens there, may it be a take, a land of a fish, or a loss of a fish, you know exactly what I'm talking about. These are mental highs and mental lows. And back to the dopamine regimen. The way how social media works is actually the very same model on why swinging flies is so addictive. Intermittent random reward is the principle that is behind that. Intermittent random reward means, for social media, you scroll about and you think, oh, shit. And the moment you want to turn off, you find something, that's interesting, and that keeps you in the loop there. You keep scrolling again, shit. And this is the same principle that happens when you cast for salmon, for example. Yeah? Cast, swing. You know, if you've done it before, you know how dire and how unbelievable dumb salmon fishing can also be, and like monotone was the word I was looking for, not dumb, of course. But like you have to fight it through to the next take. And that is the same principle that is behind that, because that intermittent random reward principle is also that principle that, from a historical perspective, our prehistoric hunters, they needed that in their brains, that dopamine reglement, and that wanting to keep going for the sense of sustenance. Excuse me that I am so difficult to follow, because I'm not English speaking originally. And yeah, I've also always have to look for the words, because I'm still kind of, and I always get so stoked when I think about that alone. Like, I mean, close your eyes for a minute and think you were fishing for hours, put yourself into that dialed down, fighting it through cast after cast moment, and then suddenly you get that take. There is nothing in the world of which I am aware. If you know something better, let me know. And if you could tube that chemical that is hitting your brain when you get a take, if you could bag that chemical, that hits your brain when you get a take, you probably own the world. That make you think, hey, that means actually we do own the world already. Because as a swinging fly fisherman, you are the only or one of the few people who really know how proper drugs can hit you.
This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?
Are you with me? If you have done it before, you're with me. And then you also understand why salmon fishers are so addicted and are also so me. And I told you I'm a casting addict. And my favorite mental mind drug of them all in the meantime is flycastamine, how I call it. And that is the brain high that occurs when you master the cast. When you truly control a fly, rod and line. And that is what I do and teach. I teach control with a fly rod via the tools and toys of the positive reinforcement casting, and also through my program of the control process casting by Michael Repotz. If you're interested in that, fire me a message, DM, Instagram. And if you like mental highs from standing in the river with ice cold feet for hours and suddenly getting a take,
This is drugs.
this here is the right place for you, and also the coolest fly fishing channel on YouTube. It is time!
Casting is an art that is performed on a 4-count rhythm between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock.
Hands up right now. I'd like you to cast with me.
You might think this here is a boring channel, but let me tell you, from a couple of experiences already, here is where the people who stand in public and try to sell you fly fishing get their information from. Only last month, one of the subscribers of this channel here fired a discussion on April Vokey's channel about lines.
Received this email from a listener, Ben, and Ben has said, for background, I purchased a very high-end 5-weight rod, and for the first year didn't really like it until I heard randomly that this rod needs to be used with a line weight heavier. A Rio Grande was suggested. This rod is amazing with this line because although it's advertised as a 5-weight line, a 5-weight rod, it actually is effectively a standard 6-weight line on what is effectively a 6-weight rod. So why not just call them that? I found out after the fact that if I wanted a 5-weight rod of this model, I actually should have bought a 4-weight. It's a bit crazy. I like the 1 to 14 line weight system for its simplicity, but the industry has confused the heck out of consumers by pushing the envelope a bit far on this. And I strongly believe we should go back to grain weights and single hand rods so everybody is clear about what they're manufacturing, buying, using, etc. I'd like to hear rod and line manufacturers or reps and maybe some outfitters voice their opinions on this. And
Of course, I left a comment there and said, the dude is coming from here and I can't tell you the whole story, but I'm only saying to you, what is discussed here might sound boring for you or a lot of wickety blah blah, but what is discussed here, you will find that discussed and handled shortly after and in other specialist circles.
Wow, I'm wondering if Ben isn't rather more confused now as he was before listening to this podcast. I truly have great respect for all of you for fine experts, April, Jeff, Tim and Simon. But I also have to say that you missed out on some major aspects to answer Ben's question, as well as some of the information you offered is incorrect in my point of view. Tim offering the idea to go out with a fixed line anchor and a rattle trigger or what?
I mostly fish the salt in Mexico. I love the overweighted lines paired with an extra fast action rod. The Rio outbound short has been a staple of mine for years. 3 line sizes heavy in the first 30 feet. It's sure not for everyone, but I rarely use anything else.
That was the case with the wave spay twice already. That was the case with the discussions about the lines now. I have to admit I didn't even watch that discussion because I have the only unbiased experiment about that shit here on my channel, and that is the anti-aphthma experiment. And I should have maybe not called it the anti-aphthma experiment, but we have to point out where the problems are. So that's why I called it the anti-aphthma experiment. But what that experiment does is it leaves the aphthma regimen out and gives the angler an unbiased self-validation of the rod and the line.
It's freedom.
And that sounds for you weird at the beginning because you're so used to taking a 5 rod and a 5 line. But do that experiment, tape off a rod, take an old rod, tape the AFTMA rating of it, give it to a buddy and say to him, tell me what line is good for this rod. And just see what happens. You are the only one who knows that line rating for the rod, and you tell the buddy, you take an old rod too, tape it off, give it to me. Don't tell me what it is, and then you find out for yourself what sense the AFTMA rating makes and what not. Because you can blah 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 for hours there and lament about how beautiful fly casting is and what to do this and that, and of course there's certain specifications where a heavier line or a lighter line might make more sense, but just do this experiment. It's a little commitment, I know, but I'm asking you, do that little commitment, do that little experiment, take the rod off, line rating, tape it off the rod, give it to a buddy and tell him, rate that rod for me. Where are the line ratings for the rods coming from, and who are they made from, and what are they made for? What is the underlying thinking and system of the AFTMA line rating, line qualification? That is what you have to think about, and also look into what the real specialists do often. And what they really do often is they overline.
It's freedom.
Look at scattered casting by itself. And the best way to do this is actually either find a friend who you can do this experiment with, or get yourself indeed a Spainergy rod, because Spainergy rods have no line ratings on them. Here. That is for a certain reason that they have no line ratings on them. And Michael Reports and Spainergy is the first conceptual mental approach it, and I learned extremely much from it, and that is why I can tell you all that shit here. And that is also the reason why April Vokey and Simon Gasworth and co are discussing that now, believe it or not, but I can prove that through a subscriber of this channel here. And that is very great to see that we are the cool caster lets the marionettes dance here. Go out and practice. Do that experiment.
It's freedom.
Get yourself a Spainergy rod. Get yourself into the Spainergy configuration. Let's call this experiment not anti-AFTMA experiment. That sounds very anti and so on. Let's better call it the positive Spainergy experiment. Positive vibration. Ooh, positive. Casterman vibration. Try it out for yourself, and you see, you have to make that experience by yourself, and that's why I made this.
It's freedom.
This experiment. You have to. The whole fly fishing market, the whole fly fishing game is highly biased through a few structures of belief that allow no other types of thinking. Which is tragic. Tragic but true. But if you go back in history and you follow the Spainergy concept of the positive vibration, you find someone who is called Sandy Batten. aka Alexander Grant. What do you think? Like, if you follow the channel here, you know that I am a footstepper of Alexander, and I follow the footsteps and his work. And he tuned himself and his rods in with a tuning fork. What do you think happens if you tune yourself into a rod and line system by making the line the tuning fork for your rod? Let that thinking sit in for a while. Think of an exercise where you take the fixed line anchor out, metronome style.
On a metronome. He began each session with the same instruction. Casting is an art that is performed on a 4-count rhythm between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. If he had had his way, nobody who did not know how to catch a fish would be allowed to disgrace a fish for catching it.
And you play yourself through the different line weights, and suddenly you find the right combination. As in tuning a bow, an arrow to a bow. If you don't believe me, look up what the archers do. They do a very similar thing because they try to find out what arrow weight shoots best for their individual setup, draw length, physical condition, and bow setup. That is something the whole fly fishing game misses out on because the AFTMA system is too restrictive and doesn't even look in that
It's freedom.
ballpark. That is why I have made the Spainergy to help you and to kick off that discussion
The energy that is in the system.
so you can get a better
Much
education
cleaner.
and a wider view on things and enjoy the tremendously cool sport of fly fishing even more with the help of the self-evaluating and self-educating tools of the PRFC, together with the thinking, not of the anti-AFTMA experiment, we cannot say that, but with the help of the positive vibration of the Spainergy experiment. Thank you very much for tuning in again, and I hope we see you soon again. Please do not forget, we don't own the water, the water owns us.
Eventually, the rocks or timeless rains merge into one. I am haunted
The
under the
energy
rocks
that is
are
in
the
the
words,
system.
and a river runs through, and some of the words
Much cleaner.
are theirs.